watch and listen to this. Please watch and listen. Do not forget to share after watching. Watch and listen.
Now, to start with, Africa will likely see higher numbers of coronavirus cases in coming weeks because of the likelihood some are slipping through the net. That's according to the head of a regional disease control body who said that this week.
The virus is multiplied in Africa more slowly than Asia or Europe, but 34 nations on the continent have now reported a total of more than 600 cases. Worldwide, it has infected nearly 220 people and killed nearly 9,000.
And in Kenya, unusually, Muslims held their prayers this Friday online, as Andrew Wasike reports.
Muslims in Kenya this Friday held prayers via online portals set up by mosques. In the capital Nairobi, Kenya's Jamia Mosque, the biggest in East Africa, announced that it had officially closed due to COVID-19. Other mosques across Nairobi have also closed after a series of consultations with the Kenya Muslim medical professionals. I spoke to some Muslims who followed Friday prayers on a live stream.
As you can see, I am following the Juma prayers from my live stream. It is on YouTube channel called Juma Masjid. We are doing this because many mosques in Nairobi are closed to stop the spread of coronavirus.
So we've been advised to live stream on their websites and their social media networks, the Friday prayer, that is today. So we are all advised to just go onto their website or to their social media and follow the prayers online.
That was Andrew Wasike with that story on how Muslims stayed back home and prayed via online. And asked on our Facebook page to tell us what you're doing to help cut down the spread of the disease.
Yes, we had here Eke Maxo Nduwisi says, here in Nigeria, Muslim clerics say that all Nigerians Muslim have strong immune system and also stress that coronavirus cannot affect them.
And Eka Ekwe says he is praying in the name of Jesus Christ and keeping clean and safe distance from the people.
Christopher Zepabi says, hey, I think Allah will protect them. Let them congregate and pray.
Thanks for your comments there. Now, in South Africa, Health Minister Zweli Mkhize has said that the number of confirmed coronavirus cases had risen by 52 to 202, with the first cases recorded in the Free State province.
The virus has multiplied in Africa more slowly than in Asia or Europe, but the number of cases has started to rise more rapidly in South Africa in recent days. Africa's most industrialized economy has the most cases in sub-Saharan Africa. Tuso Kumalo reports from Johannesburg.
South Africa says between 60 and 70% of its people will get coronavirus. This reality has forced the government working together with taxi owners to start disinfecting taxis that carry over 16 million commuters daily. This program that has kicked off in some taxi ranks will also see commuters being given hand sanitizers every time they ride a taxi. Minister of Transport spokesperson Ayanda Alipain says the government is leaving nothing to chance.
We're already starting to do your awareness campaigns, educating the commuters and the taxi operators, the queue marshals on how to open and close doors and sanitize the doors. Something as simple as that.
Thank you so much, Tuso Kumalo, for that report. And we posted earlier on our Facebook page, and we got comments from Mohammed Usamini, who says, may God provide the cure for us and protect us from this chronic virus.
Now, here in Germany, the country's disease control center is reporting the number of cases has jumped again.
Researchers are racing against the clock to find a vaccine for coronavirus. DW's Derek Williams explains what they've been up to.
Well, on the prevention and treatment side of things, there's been a lot of chatter about an attempt to develop a vaccine in the UK, which they fast-tracked. Expert out there continues to say that we won't be seeing a vaccine before mid-2021 at the earliest. There's also been a spike in excitement about possibly treating the disease with an anti-malarial medication. But with treatment still somewhere down the line, a lot of the focus is on the measures that different countries are implementing to try to contain the spread of the disease and to what extent they could influence or accelerate what's called herd immunity. Well, herd immunity is the goal in an outbreak. It describes a situation where so many people in a population are immune to an infection that it can effectively stop the disease from spreading. So people can grow immune in one of two different ways. Either they can catch the disease and build up an immune response, that'll prevent them from being infected by the same bug in the future, or they can be given a vaccine that provokes the same response, even though they didn't catch the disease. So for the purposes of herd immunity, it doesn't really matter which of those two ways they develop an immune response. What's important is that as the number of people who are immune to the bug grows in a population, the slower the bug begins to spread. So imagine a situation where you're at the beginning of this outbreak and no one is immune, and an infected person gives it to 2 other people. Well, once 50% of the population has acquired immunity, then an infected person can only statistically give it to 1 other person rather than 2, because the other one would have been given, that they would have given it to is already protected. So rising immunity in the herd and society as a whole acts on as a brake on the spread of the disease. But there's been a lot of discussion in Britain and the Netherlands in particular about trying to reach herd immunity in a controlled way in their populations. But that means that with where we are right now with no vaccine, the authorities would basically have to accept that large numbers of people are getting sick quickly, so their immunity would help protect the rest.
That was Derek Williams from DW's Sun Department. And yes, Jose, I think the coronavirus story, we've tried to give it so much justice. But anyway, in Guinea, the country is defying the coronavirus pandemic to hold a controversial referendum on Sunday that could allow the president, that's Alpha Condé, to stay longer in power. Nearly 5 million voters are registered to vote, for which also will choose 14 National Assembly members. President Condé, whose second and current final term ends in December, might win the chance to stand for 2 more 7-year terms.
Some civil society groups urge authorities to postpone the vote until the end of the pandemic. Guinea has 2 cases of the virus, according to the National Agency for Health Security. However, the ruling party has said the cases cannot prevent the rest of the country from voting. From Conakry, Karim Kamara sent this report.
Tensions in Guinea remain high 48 hours before voters go to the polls in a referendum that could see President Alpha Condé extend his rule. However, a coalition of opposition and civil society groups, the National Front for the Defence of the Constitution, which has been demonstrating against the referendum, has called for another demonstration on Saturday and Sunday against the election. Amadou Diallo is a member of the Guinean opposition, said they will do everything possible to disrupt the process.
This election won't take place. We won't accept it. The constitution is not going to be changed. The old constitution will continue until 2040. We will attack any polling station. We can't accept it because it is a constitutional coup d'etat.
The Electoral Commission has begun sending voting materials into the provinces, and here in Conakry, the installation of polling stations continues despite the threat by opposition, and many other people are determined to go to the poll. The National Platform for Initiatives and Citizens' Participation, a civil society movement, has called on Guineans to come out massively and vote on Sunday. Ahmed Sheku Traoré is the head, said that Guinea needs a better constitution that allows independent candidates to stand in an election. He said a civil society movement must be with the people and seek the people's interests.
We activists of the civil society, we are mobilizing citizens for the 22nd of March for this election, especially the referendum, because as you know, on the political side, parliamentary election is not more motivating the civil society because we are not part of the election, even though we are observers. But in most countries, you have an independent candidate who can be able to be elected in a national election. But in Guinea, we don't have it because the constitution don't recognize us. A real civil society is members of those who are at the side of the people, at the citizen side. So today, what we can say is that we are encouraging every one of us to go and vote on the 22nd.
About 90 observers from 15 African countries are already on the ground, but observers from the African Union and the AU have not arrived, presumably due to the corona threat.
Karim Kamara reporting from Conakry. And very quickly through your comments, Kemo Jombo Kunda says, I'm disappointed in this selfish president we have in Africa. I hate self why I'm an African.
Levi Otiepo says Alpha Condé is doing the very things he fought against while in the opposition. Will the military please stand up?
And Manja Madina says that's in total disregard of WHO protocols to the detriment of Guineans. I don't understand why some leaders have transformed themselves into desperados. Many thanks for those comments. Stay with us on DW Africa.
In case you're just joining us, welcome to the Africa Link show from our Deutsche Welle studios here in Bonn, Germany. I am Josie Mahachi.
And my name is Isaac Mugabe. Remember, we're also streaming live on our Facebook page, DW Africa. A big shout out to Olu Agbeni, who says live and direct from Bonn. Abia Jerry Ekwambe says, I'm listening from Dubai. Lovelyn Ben May says, I'm listening to you live from Canada. Yakimelia Gajol Khan says, hello, DW Africa. Good evening. I'm happy for being part of the show. Thanks for your wonderful weekly updates on the African news. And I'm listening from Cairo. We have also Sandy Edem, who says live from Akwa Ibom State. And so is Yakimelia Khan says, thanks be to God, to the Almighty, that at least, you guys are covering the stories on the coronavirus. Many thanks and keep it up at DW Africa.
Still to come, we go back to our African roots with the warrior princess of Zazao.
She led armies of ground warriors and cavalries, securing territories and wealth and making a lasting impression in the history of that time.
You wouldn't like to miss that very interesting musical and story about African roots. Your roots, stay with us.
Then we go to Africa, where we're focusing on Namibia's 30th anniversary celebrations that have been dampened by the coronavirus. Nevertheless, it continues to be one of Africa's most stable and wealthiest countries per capita.
But there is growing dissatisfaction among Namibians about the lack of change of joblessness, corruption, and unhealed wounds remain even 30 years after throwing off the shackles of apartheid. DW's Kainebe with the report.
Human rights lawyer Beans Kawanas was being held in a refugee camp in Angola when she heard the news she could return home from exile to Namibia.
And it was like a dream. I was like, I can't believe that this is happening during my lifetime, that I'm going back to Namibia.
Namibia had suffered decades of dehumanizing colonialism, South African occupation, and apartheid law. A war of independence had raged since 1966. Finally, under severe pressure, South Africa withdrew in 1989. United Nations Resolution 435 came into effect, and the UN-supervised elections followed. On the 21st of March 1990, Namibia was born.
I fought for the independence of Namibia. For my children and the children of Namibia, to not experience what I experienced growing up under apartheid.
Fast forward 30 years. Namibia is one of Africa's wealthiest and most stable countries, but the independence struggle left many deep scars. No truth and reconciliation process followed Namibian independence, which does not sit well with Kawanas.
I think that was very, very unfortunate. And it does not therefore mean that racism does not exist anymore. That what happened in exile in the Swapo refugee camps did not happen. I think those things are still simmering. It is.
The German community in Namibia benefited from colonial land seizures and the subsequent apartheid regime. German Namibian Wilfred Brock works for the Namibian government, and his family has lived in Namibia for generations.
I think it's mainly a matter of whether the whites fully identify themselves as Namibians, and if they can manage to discard the prejudices that they have against their fellow Namibians. White community in Namibia has, in my opinion, not done enough, is by far, to integrate itself into the Namibian society.
Whites still control a disproportionately large share of the economy, but independence slowly altered the landscape by developing a black middle class, though unemployment still hovers at around 33%. In the 2019 election, President Hage Geingob won just 56% of the vote, the lowest ever for a SWAPO candidate. For political analyst Ndapwa Alguendo, it shows a rift between the older and post-independence generations.
For the younger generation, often what is one of the biggest criticisms of us by sort of older people in positions of power is that we are grateful to the sacrifices that were made to free this country and to liberate this country.
Despite growing dissatisfaction, SWAPO has comfortably won each election, which for Beans Kawanas has slowed Namibia's democratic development.
We do not have what I would really say a very strong opposition that serves as a checks and balance. And the same applies to a strong civil society organization.
building a national identity and breaking down barriers, something the artist Ease is trying to do with his brand of Namibian Kwaito music.
So people then said, listen, the music you do is very difficult to put into one genre. So that's why I started calling it Nam flavor music. So Namibian flavor, it's inspired by all of us to make Namibia as one under music.
At 30 years old, Namibia is still coming to terms with a turbulent past, developing a shared identity and shaping a united future.
Kainebe with that report on Namibia's 30th anniversary independence celebrations. Now to the interesting piece that we promised in our billboard. It's about African history, Africa's rich history that is also musical and enriching in all ways. Now, at a time when men dominated most aspects of life, Amina, the queen of Zazao, emerged. A skillful Hausa warrior, she commanded a vast army which conquered many territories and greatly expanded her kingdom.
She opened up trade routes and secured her city with earthen walls. But as DW's Zelia Flourish narrates, this extraordinary African woman was not without controversy.
Queen Amina of Zazao was a warrior queen in Africa in the 16th century who reigned for 34 years in what is now known as the city of Zaria in modern-day northern Nigeria. She led armies of ground warriors and cavalries, securing territories and wealth and making a lasting impression in the history of that time. Amina is believed to have been born in 1520, but she became princess and heir to the throne of Zazao in 1536, when her father Baku Turunku was installed as emir of the kingdom. Amina was largely raised by her grandmother Maka, who, being a noble herself, instructed her carefully on the politics and matters of the state. As she grew older, she spent most of her time in one of the kingdom's military training grounds that was called Turunku. It was where slaves and warriors captured in battle were camped and made to undergo further training to defend the kingdom. Isa Galadima Abdul Karim Tukur Tukur, a media aide in the palace of the emir of Zazao, explains.
Amina, we have to understand historically, was the eldest daughter, and according to tradition, the eldest son was normally crowned as Madaki of Zazao. So then it was only Amina and then her immediate sister Zaria. She is at the same time a princess and at the same time now assumed the position of Madaki.
When Amina finally took over, the kingdom was suffering serious attacks from its neighbors, like the Kwararafa kingdoms and the Unbuntawa people, who were neither Hausa nor Fulani. But all this changed when Amina began her campaigns. According to Isa Galadima Abdul Karim Tukur Tukur, though the raids seemed to portray her as ruthless, at the heart of it she was also a humanitarian.
Almost all the land conquered by Amina, beside the wallings, she used to dig wells just for the people to get water. You see, this is another humanitarian service. It is not only the war.
Despite this, some are in contention as to whether she really existed, or whether she's just another myth. Dr. Shoaibu Shehu Aliyu of Ahmadu Bello University explains.
The first person that drew the attention of the historian on the history of Queen Amina was Sultan Muhammad Bello. He was the first that captured the history of Queen Amina in his family books in Pakar and Mysore. And he stated that we were told there was a famous queen in the kingdom of Zazo who reigned in the 16th century.
Although historians continue to debate that she was a warrior, Dr. Shoaibu Shehu Aliyu says she was a very influential ruler in the 16th century, who was even compared to the famous hero queen of ancient Egypt, Hatshepsut.
Queen Amina has contributed significantly in the development of the political history, on the social history, on the economic history of the Zazo Emirate. Indeed, she was more accredited with the expansion of the then kingdom of Zazo. The history of Queen Amina is not a myth, it's a reality.
The story is also told of how Amina took a man for herself after each raid, but they all met the same fate the morning after, as they were all beheaded. She died after one of such battles, except there are two accounts of how she died. But the most acceptable is that Amina died at Atagara, a place in modern-day Kogi state of Nigeria.
Zilia Frolish with that interesting bit of history about Amina, the queen of Zazau, who was a skillful Hausa warrior. And for many of these pieces or these episodes about African roots, you can always go to our webpage, dw.com/Africa.
Talking Sport.
And now, let's talk sport. Today, we focus on corruption in sports. Football has turned into a billion-dollar industry across the world, but Africa remains at the edge of this lucrative system.
And Africa's problems are caused by systematic and institutionalized football administration structures. The continued underperformance of African teams over the years will be used as a yardstick to measure the stagnant nature of the game in Africa.
Local leagues and clubs on the continent are largely run unprofessionally, except in very few countries, and accusations of match fixing are abound.
And coupled to this, DW's Abuja correspondent Waisu Idris caught up with Ghanaian undercover investigative journalist Anas Ermayu Anas and started by asking him on the effects of FIFA taking over the African nations' football affairs. And you can now take a listen and sit back, enjoy.
Looking at what is happening, FIFA had to even more or less take over the affairs of CAF.
I think that the reason why perhaps FIFA may have taken over issues of corruption in sports on the African continent is perhaps the reason that African journalists have not really delved deep to look into issues of corruption in sports in many countries. And I think that we are now waking up. We are now realizing that perhaps if we need to make any impact and to put a smile on the faces of sports enthusiasts on the continent, we will have to take issues of corruption much more seriously. Perhaps we have also, as African journalists, underestimated the amount of money that we lose in sports. The academies that are supposed to be built across the continent. Whereas issues of sports may not be important to some learned people, there are kids in the village whose livelihood have changed 360 degrees because of sporting activities. So maybe our casual attitude to issues on sport is what has led to that. But there's a new phase, new awakening, where African journalists are now beginning to realize that if the story of sports ought to be told, it ought to be told by the African. The implications are bad for the continent, because what we do is that with corruption, you stifle sporting initiative, you stifle skills and talent. Look at what Drogba brings to the continent. Look at the other big players like ACN, Asamoah Gyan, and many other great players bring onto the continent. Sports has become a cash crop, which is aiding in helping poor African countries rise up. Apart from making sure that the name of those countries stay high up there, it is also helping solve the poverty situations in the villages and rural areas of these young great players. The problem of leaving sports corruption to kill our continent is actually one that will destroy us. The way out is very simple, that African journalists now take sports corruption very seriously. African government also take prosecution of corrupt officials more seriously. People in the society keep the watchdog role, also watch on activities of sporting associations and organizations, so that we can all shine proper light and to tell the full story and to allow transparency and light in the area of sports.
That was investigative journalist Anas Ermayu Anas speaking to our own Waisu Abubakar. Now, Josie, before we call it a day, allow me to bring you this breaking story from my own country, Rwanda, in a bid to kind of mitigate measures, keep the coronavirus at bay. Today, all airports were closed. All flights inbound and outbound are not allowed to take off or even land in the capital, Kigali. As if that was not enough, now the interesting bit is that bars are supposed to lock or to close at 9 p.m., That is in the city, and 7 p.m. in the villages. So my friends are warming up to go and quench their thirst. It's really very, very sad news to them. Commiserations to you guys. Anyway, with that, we come to the end of the show. I'm Isaac Mugabi.
And I'm Josie Mahachi, signing out.
DW